Hey guys, welcome back. My name's Melissa if you're new here, and for today's video we are going to talk about my 5 top hardest plants in my collection. These are plants that I've struggled with the most. Some of these plants have gone back about 2 years since I first got them, and I will kind of be showing you my journey with them, how they looked when I first got them, what happened to them, how they're doing now, if I'm still struggling with them, or if they're doing better. And I will just kind of share my journey on these plants and what I went through, and maybe it'll help you if you are struggling with some of the same plants I'm going to be talking about. So I really hope you enjoy this video, and let's get started. These plants that I'm going to be showing you are also very thirsty. I have to water my plants, so keep that in mind. This one here is a little dehydrated. I need to water this plant. Up first, we are going to talk about my Philodendron Gloriosum. This is her here. I first got this plant around this time 2 years ago. I think it was around my birthday, so it was in January. So this plant is almost 2 years old, and it has done a lot better, I would say, since about summer of this year. I actually have an old video on this plant. I ended up having to completely start over and reroot this entire plant. It had root rot, and that was a struggle to deal with, and I completely rerouted it in moss. It took quite a while to finally establish itself and get a decent root system. And after that, I potted it into a chunky mix, and it did okay for a while. And then I feel like, I don't know what caused me to repot it again, but I ended up repotting it again, I would say several months ago, and it has done better since then. Now, I will say this plant did come down with thrips this summer, as with a lot of my plants in my collection. So this guy did take a bit of a hit. I actually have a leaf that has thrip damage here. Now, I do have 2 separate nodes growing in here. I have one main vine that is going to push out a new leaf, and it is on the edge of the pot, which I will probably have to repot this plant sometime in the near future. And I do have a separate node here that is growing on the side. So when I cut this plant to propagate it, it had lost pretty much all of its leaves, so there was like one long stem with different nodes. So I ended up chopping what I could to save it, and so it left me with 2 parts. That's why I have 2 plants in here. So eventually I'll probably have to separate them. These are crawlers, so they normally are, you might see them potted into long rectangular pots. Since they don't really climb, they crawl along the rainforest floor in nature. I think the reason why I struggle with this plant, it was plant mail initially. I got it with 3 leaves, and it didn't have the best root system initially, and I think it just went into shock. These plants don't like to be shipped. And this was back when I had first started like really ordering plant mail, and I didn't really know that at the time about this plant, and it lost 2 of its original leaves, and my grow lights are about to go out. So if you notice some lights changing in here, just FYI. And then of course I overwatered it like I used to back in the day and rotted it out. I don't know if it's as much of a difficult plant anymore as it once was, if that makes sense. This one probably wasn't the healthiest initially, so if I started off with a healthier plant from the beginning, I'm sure I probably would have done better with it, but who knows, I could have caused root rot regardless. So my main issue, or if you are looking to get one of these plants, just be mindful the root system is very delicate and they can get root rot very easily. I would recommend a breathable chunky mix, and be careful not to over or underwater. And yeah, mine gets some like medium to bright indirect light. It sits under a Barina grow light, and it is in a chunky mix, and I water when it's probably like 3/4 dry. It is thirsty. I do need to water this plant, so it does appear to be a little droopy just because I feel like it's thirsty. And I would say pests to watch out for would definitely be thrips. This one came down with thrips, and then probably spider mites. I feel like spider mites tend to like some of these phylos. But I love this plant, and I just think the overall leaf shape is beautiful and it has beautiful veining. I think Gloriosum will always be one of my favorite philodendrons. I do have a hybrid of this plant as well, which I love, but I think the classic Gloriosum will always be a favorite, and I can't wait until this gets big and long and climbs and gets bigger leaves. So I'm excited for that. So I will say it's doing better. Is it the happiest? Probably not, but it is doing a lot better. And I'm excited to see how it does next year for me. I need to turn my grow lights back on before they all go off. All right, plant number 2, you guys. Plant number 2 is my Philodendron Verrucosum. You might notice a trend in this video of a philodendron. This one, out of all of them, has been the absolute hardest for me, and it is now finally, crossing my fingers, finally growing a bit better. This plant started off as probably the worst possible condition this plant could have like arrived to me in. So this was plant mail. I got it actually a little bit before my Gloriosum, and it was around December time. It was cold. The weather was not in this plant's favor. I actually ordered this as plant mail, and it got lost in the mail for 2 weeks. This plant arrived with dead leaves, and it arrived covered in spider mites, and it was a total disaster. What you see here, this growth, is actually from a baby node that I had to regrow from that original plant. I do hear that these plants are picky, but I think it came in horrible condition. It took a long time to rehab it. I remember in the old house, I had like 3 or 4 plastic bags of like individual nodes that I cut up because they didn't have leaves because they all like were pretty much dead and covered in spider mites. So I chopped up the nodes of what I could. I grew them. I had several plants growing. I think I ended up selling a couple of those for some reason. I had an old plant group, and I used to do purges just to make some money off of some of my plants, and I sold some cuttings. I actually had this plant growing pretty nicely, and I took a top cut of it to sell again, and that's, I think that was my mistake, taking that top cut. I think taking that cut caused the plant to go into shock, and it pretty much just stopped growing, and it pretty much died again. So I saved what I could, and I took a node. So this will be the 3rd time trying to grow this plant. This is actually 2 nodes. So I had a couple nodes growing in my prop box, and that's what this is here. This is actually 2 nodes. I have 1 vine here growing, and then I have 1 vine here growing. So this is 2 separate plants in here, and this new leaf here actually just unfurled like not that long ago. It's actually still hardening. So it's just been a struggle. It's been a long journey. It's kind of a little bit, it's not super clear of the entire journey with this plant. I just know that this is the 3rd time trying to grow it. When I moved here, I will put a picture on the screen of what it looked like. I had put it on a bigger moss pole because I was like, yes, as this plant is growing, I'm going to get it on a pole. It's going to start growing and climbing. And I think I underwatered it because the pole was so huge in this plant. The root system was not very good. So that was my mistake. I should have let it root more and got established a bit more before I stuck it straight on a pole. So that was my fault. And yeah, so what I ended up doing was taking it off of a pole and putting it on a thickly pole. And I stuck it in my cabinet. It's currently living in my IKEA cabinet. Not that the humidity and stuff is like that much better in my cabinet, because outside of my environment it's a little less humid, so it usually stays in the 70s for temperature and humidity in there. And so I think this guy prefers being in the cabinet, and I was definitely underwatering it when it was on that big pole, which caused it to not really grow. So now that it's on a thickly pole, it's staying a bit moist like overall, which I think is helping this plant and being in a more stable environment. So I would love to give this plant another go. I would actually love like to start over with this plant with a different plant and see like if I struggle with it, and see if the care is the same, see if it grows better for me. This plant had a rough go, and I didn't give up on it because now look at the growth I'm getting. So I will grow this plant into a big plant one day, and it's going to have such a long journey and a long history with me. I have not had a pest on this plant besides the initial spider mites that it came with, but I know Verrucosum are very prone to spider mites, so that is something to watch out for. And yeah, I have another new leaf growing on this stem, and hopefully it'll continue to grow and do well for me. I do need to water this plant after this video, but yes, I'm very happy to see it growing well. These plant leaves are so beautiful. They have like the beautiful fuzzy petiole on the back. This one doesn't have any fuzzies right now because it hasn't really grown, you know, to see that yet. But a very beautiful plant. I do have a hybrid of this plant as well, which I love. I have a Splendid, and I also have a Glorious, which those are a hybrid of the Melanochrysum, which is a plant I'm going to talk about. And yeah, we'll talk about that plant next. That is plant number 3. So plant number 3 has been the Melanochrysum. I no longer have my first plant. I will try and find a picture of it. It was a single leaf cutting that I got from a local plant group. When I got the cutting, I didn't realize until I got home and was inspecting it that it had spider mites. So, of course, another philo with spider mites, and it just was not doing well. I was battling spider mites on this plant for a while. I did get it to grow, and their growth was kind of wonky and weird. And so I ended up chopping the plant back, and I think, again, that was my mistake. I should not have chopped it. I should have got it on a pole a lot sooner, but back then I wasn't really growing plants on poles. I got the Melanochrysum probably a few months after these other previous 2 that I just talked about. And yeah, I cut it back, and the growth that I cut back died, the individual cuttings, and the main plant just never grew again. I just don't know what happened to it. I had it like rooting in a plastic bag for months and months and months, and it didn't do anything. So before I moved, I just got rid of it. And thankfully, I have another Milano that I got from Root Greenhouse. You guys have seen this recently. I actually have 5 or 6 little node props in my cabinet from this plant, and I do have it growing up on a thickly pole, so this will be my second try at this plant. So I'm hoping this one does a lot better for me. Again, this plant came from Root Greenhouse, and it wasn't in the best condition, and it was rotted. So again, I feel like these plants haven't been the healthiest when I got them. So yeah, some of these have just been a struggle bus initially from the get-go. I know they can be difficult plants, you know, to grow, and they take a really long time to get to those mature leaves. I do hear that they are somewhat picky. This one is in my cabinet as well. I'm going to keep it in there, and I think just having it on a thickly pole is going to help this plant retain some moisture. I do need to get it out of this tiny pot. I shouldn't have potted in this small one. When those nodes that I have growing in my prop box, when I transfer those over, I'm going to put a couple on here and let a few vines climb up, and then I'm going to repot it into a slightly bigger pot. So that is a plan with this one, but I am definitely letting this one climb. And yeah, other than that, I mean, ever since I've rehabbed this one, it's been doing okay. So just be mindful that if you don't get them supported, this one is going to grow really wonky leaves, and it may get spider mites too, so that would be a pest to watch out for. But yeah, I would be cautious when getting this plant, and just keep in mind that it can be a bit finicky. Plant number 4 I talked about in another video, so I'm going to touch on this for this video. This is my variegated Monstera Peru. It just won't stop browning. It has beautiful variegation, but for some reason the yellow parts are just browning, which they don't have as much chlorophyll, which is understandable, but it just hasn't been the healthiest plant. Each new leaf will brown almost immediately, and half of the leaf just disappears. And yeah, I don't really see variegated Monstera Perus at all. If you love the regular Monstera Peru, I would recommend that one. The variegated one, I just haven't had good luck with. The cutting that this came to me was beautiful, and I did get it to grow several leaves, and they all were beautiful. I did end up chopping this in an old video on my channel because it did start browning, so I chopped it back. Each new leaf that has come back since the chop is just browning again. It's a beautiful plant. I do love Monstera Peru. I love Monstera. I love the variegation on this guy. It just won't stop browning. So haven't quite figured this one out yet, and if I can prevent the browning. I mean, it's browning even way before the leaf even hardens. I don't know if you can see, like, it's not even fully hardened yet and it's already browning, so I don't know. I repotted it not too long ago. I mean, it seems, I can see the healthy roots. I feel like the root system and stuff is fine, and it's getting a decent amount of light that you would think it wouldn't brown off the whiter parts, you know, but I don't know. It just hasn't been the happiest, and still struggling with this guy. And the fifth and final plant that I have struggled with is my Anthurium Warocqueanum. Now, these leaves here in the front that you see are pretty new, so they look pretty healthy and pretty good. I do have another leaf behind that is growing, which is pretty happy and healthy. And I do have some new growth down in there as well. And here is a new leaf that's popping out. And I have a couple older leaves, this one and this one, that is yellowing and browning. I think I may have gotten rid of upwards to like 6 or 7 leaves on this plant. None of the original leaves are with this plant. I got this plant as a 3 or 4 leaf, I think it was 4 leaves, as a decent size, like small plant. It was in moss, I believe. I got it shipped in the mail. It did okay for a while. I didn't have like a greenhouse cabinet. This was at the old house. I didn't have the best environment for anthuriums because the humidity and stuff was really low in my old house. I don't know, even after being in my cabinet, I've had my cabinet up since I moved around April of this year, and even being in my cabinet under like good light, and I don't know, it just hasn't been the happiest. I do have it in a substrate where it has orchid bark, cocoa coir, perlite, there's sphagnum moss on top. You know, it isn't a coarse mixture. It's not straight moss, but I think it's just, I think I'm letting it get too dry. So I do want to repot this plant eventually here and add some more sphagnum moss into the mix to hopefully keep the soil base a little bit more hydrated. I think that's what I want to do with this one. This plant is completely dry. It's just, sometimes I can't always water my cabinet twice a week, or I'm like a day or 2 late on it, which I am this week. I should have watered it Thursday and today's Saturday, so I am behind schedule. So after this video, I will be doing some watering tonight. But yeah, I've been like chronically underwatering it too, which isn't helping. And I think I may have over fertilized it at one point as well, because I was testing some different fertilizer out on my plants over the summer. I do hear these are a difficult anthurium, which in my experience, it has been a bit harder. You know, I do get the yellowing and crisping leaves. These two have been pushed out for about, I would say, at least a month or so, and they haven't yellowed yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if they did start yellowing like this one here. I do hope it grows better for me. I would love like pretty large Anthurium Warocqueanum leaves one day, but we'll see. It seems to be a little bit happier lately, but I still need to do better about keeping this one hydrated. So those are my top 5 hardest plants in my collection, or plants that I have struggled with. And yeah, I'm sure I have more in my collection that are a little bit more finicky, but I haven't necessarily struggled with. I know like calatheas and stuff get a bad rap, but I love calatheas and I seem to like do well with them in my care. I have like had my share of struggles with some plants, but these ones I would say are at the top of my list as far as ones that I have struggled with, have been like on the longest journey with me. I would say most of these plants are, you know, almost going on 2 years old. So they're the ones that like still to this day that I feel like are the ones that I've struggled with the most. But yeah, don't let this like stop you from getting one of these plants if you've had your eye on one of these and we're really wanting to give one a go. I would just say like keep in the back of your mind that there's a possibility that they might be a little bit finicky. Just because a plant that I've struggled with and is a little bit more finicky in my care doesn't mean it'll do the same for you. And you may get it and it may do really well for you, and that's amazing. So I would definitely love to give these another go, like another plant, like a healthier plant, like I said, and see how they would do and compare to the experience that I've already had with these ones. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this video. Thank you so much for watching and being here, and I will talk to you soon.